Hi, welcome to another episode of I Mustache You Something. I have my great, wise, honorable friend, David Broder, who was uh, my roommate in college and a upstanding citizen that I will hope shows people in our community that it's okay to be in a fraternity, and for that not necessarily to mean that you're a depraved individual. So welcome, Dave.
It's good to be here. I don't often have depraved individual used in my intros, but I like it. Felt real.
I said not necessarily. I said not necessarily.
I appreciate it.
I know that's high praise.
High praise. High praise.
I mean, I just want to, because I didn't want it to be like a secret that like you and I were fraternity brothers, and
No.
I think there's some people that are going to listen to this and be like, fraternity, and like there's like this like irrational like association where it's like no like it's not like, yeah, no, I know what you mean, but like we wasn't
Totally. I mean,
yeah.
anything you need to do to change the narrative from the fact that you're wearing a mesh Browns jersey right now, I'm here for.
So it's not mesh. This is the
It's super see-through.
No, so
what it's so see-through.
So a good friend of mine, who I went to med school with, who I'm hopefully going to be doing a mustache conversation with either tonight or at some point this week. His name's Lorenzo. He's in my phone as irresistible. That's a long story.
I don't think that's helping make your case here, but go ahead.
Well, he got me this jersey. Yeah. And the reason that he got me this jersey is because it's a Braylon Edwards jersey. And can you see that?
I can.
You can? Okay.
Yes.
So Braylon Edwards had just been traded from the Jets to the Browns, and Lorenzo was doing his fellowship in Pittsburgh at the time. So he came up to Cleveland, and we went to the Jets-Browns game together. And he got us all. Wait, did he get traded from the Browns to the Jets or the Jets? No, he got traded from the Browns to the Jets, I think. One of those. But it was like, okay, we want to root for the Jets, but we don't want to look like we're rooting for the Jets. So we had the Braylon Edwards jerseys to support the Jets, but with a Browns sort of cloak.
And it wasn't cold to wear a see-through mesh jersey outside?
He got it for me. It was a gift. And like I said, it looks like it's like the official thing. I can't control that the Cleveland jerseys are, I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't want to say low quality, but it kind of is. So the reason I'm wearing a jersey is because I always wear a jersey to church.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah, we're recording on Sunday, so you and I are talking on Sunday. And I went to church this morning, and it's related, actually, and that's why I kept it on for our conversation, related to something that we had planned to talk about, which is tribalism, right? Where
like
this is our group, this is us. And up until last year, my favorite jersey to wear was my Giants jersey because I'm a Giants fan. So I go to church and and
we should do people know where, like, you live in Massachusetts, right? You live in the heart of Patriots country.
Yeah.
It's
Foxborough Stadium, like the Patriots Stadium is like 3 miles down the road from my house.
Yeah. Showing up in a Giants jersey is arguably a provocative act.
And like this close to getting me like excommunicated, where it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I'm like, what? Like, I'm a fan. And now...
And don't go running to the Jews, because they won't take you in a Giants jersey in New England. That's not okay.
No, but there's two things that you have to know about the Jews. Number one, there's a lot of them in New York, a lot. Okay.
Okay.
And number two, they've been here in the Boston area for a lot longer than the Copts have. And before the Patriots were here, the local team was the Giants. So I'm more likely to find a safe haven with the Jews than I am with the Christians.
I think we ditched the I must ask you a question format, and you just tell me things about Jews.
Well,
not really though, because this is broadcast or on YouTube. Or are you just watching it later on your own? I don't know who the target audience is here.
Well, I do. I enjoy it. I was actually just watching in the car with Mary the like hour-long abuse session that I had with Danny Ishak. So yes, it is enjoyable for me. But yeah, I've been surprised. Like there've been a couple of people that I'm like, really? You listen to it? Like, oh, that's cool. So I think they may not share the same level of comfort that you and I have talking about each other's backgrounds. So, let's keep it light, let's keep it positive, and not necessarily the way we used to talk to each other in college.
As breezy as your jersey. Got it.
Guess what my favorite jersey to wear to church is now?
I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
So are you keeping up with the Patriots, situation?
I mean, it's dangerous, I think, for me to admit online that I don't really watch football anymore. But I do know that I'm going to guess you wear a Tom Brady jersey.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
So only after he was traded.
So as soon as he got traded, I got a Tom Brady Buccaneers jersey.
Yeah.
Like
you wear the Bucks. So you wear the Bucks jersey. You don't even wear like an old Patriots jersey. You wear the Bucks jersey.
As soon as he got traded, Mary goes, "What do you want for your birthday?" I'm like, "I want a Tom Brady."
And you wear it to church in New England. Do you also trip the older members of your congregation and laugh at them when you fall?
No.
Or when they fall, sorry. You're just standing over them, laughing at them, showing them your new jersey.
No, but I want you to play this out into your head.
Yeah.
So what happens when I go in New England somewhere with a Tom Brady Buccaneers jersey? What happens?
I assume, wait, we said we were going to keep it light. I'm not going to say that. I assume the reaction is not positive. Let's say that. I assume the reaction is poor.
That's not correct.
Really?
That's not correct. So
you think people happily are throwing fruit at you?
No. No.
Here, have this old tomato, sir.
Half the people have that reaction. The other half are like, "No, I love Brady. Brady's great." So it divides them, right? It takes their tribalism, which I have been mocking for years with the Giants jersey. Now it's even more volatile in that not only are they like tribalism, Patriots, no Giants. Now it's tribalism. Wait, no, not tribalism. Like this tribe, no, that tribe. So now there's the pro Brady Patriots fans and there's the anti Brady Patriots fans.
Gotcha. So you have, I think, correctly diagnosed a problem in American society, not just in politics, right, but of tribalism. And your answer is just to drive more wedges and create more factions. Okay, it is a novel approach. Is this like a European parliamentary multi-party theory, or you just like messing with people? Because I know you and we go back, and that sounds like classic Mina behavior.
Why do we need to choose? Why can't it be both?
It could be all of those things. It could be the key to a brighter future and just you delighting in the confusion of others. And look, mocking tribalism, you are in a long line of great satirists, many of whom were Jewish. I feel like Jon Stewart would be proud of what you're doing. I don't know that he'd be excited about you bringing a Giants jersey into it, but you know.
Wait, where's Jon Stewart from?
New York, I think. I assume he's from New York, right?
Yeah, so wouldn't he be excited about that?
He's a Jew that I don't know, so he's not from Boston. So I assume then he's from New York.
See?
That's
see?
how I figured that out. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Okay. So
well
maybe we'll send this to Jon Stewart and we'll invite him to stash me something. Because you know, like he would be the host. I mean, I'm not gonna be the host if he's around, you know.
You know, when we talked yesterday and you told me, and we didn't prepare for any of this, but you told me we were going to talk about tribalism and how to come together and make the country a better place. I thought, how do we not make this super sincere and boring? Well done. Well done. We've covered a lot of ground.
But this is something that I think is a general fallacy, which is that you influence change by telling people what to do.
Oh, no.
It doesn't work, right?
No, it really doesn't work.
Right. You have to listen to each other. You have to talk to, you have to appreciate, like no, it doesn't.
I mean, yes, you have to listen to each other.
But you can't tell people that, right? Like you can't just tell them like, you know, he has a point. And like the only response is, no, there is no point. There's no point. There's no point. But if you take whatever issue you see and you take it to its natural conclusion, right? Where it's like, are you one of us? It's like, I didn't realize there wasn't us. If there were an us, then what would it look like if I did this? It's like, oh, no, you can't do that because then you're not one of us. Like, okay, but like you just defined us in a really weird way that just happens to be what you think, not like something that we all agree on. So I think, like you said,
I love that. Do your fellow congregants, and I don't know the right term, do they know what you're up to? Or are they just like, there is something wrong with Dr. Masiha, just something really fundamentally wrong?
No, I think 90-something% just think I'm crazy. I'm okay with that.
They're going to watch this and their minds are going to be blown.
No, they're not. Nobody watches this. It's just me and my family, and like again, like those handful of people.
I'm gonna find the list of people who attend your church. I'm gonna send this to them. I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna make sure they watched it. I'm gonna like a Uber Jewish mom / organizer. I'm gonna call them 2 days later and see if they watched. Ask them why not. What are they doing that's so important that they couldn't take 45 minutes out of their day and watch me in this video?
No, but that's going to ruin everything. It's going to ruin everything because then they'll see me in a jersey and they'd be like, that's fine. You can wear whatever you want. And I'm going to be like, no, this is where you lose your mind. This is where you get upset. You're going to ruin it. Don't do that.
I'm not going to. I don't have time to do that. But I like the idea of doing that. Okay, but I won't do that.
So one thing that I think has shifted over the years, and I think I don't think this is something that is entirely to your credit, but I think is partly in your credit. Is I've shifted, like, you know, my sort of political leanings, and I don't really think that there really is such a thing as like a true Democrat or a true Republican or like a true left or a true right. But I think that with those nonsense terms, I think I've shifted left. I guess I've shifted to be more democratic minded. How and I haven't talked to you about this recently. How have you evolved? Like how has your thinking sort of you know, either changed or gained more resolve over the years?
Oh, what a great question. You know, I think I grew up in a pretty liberal Jewish home, you know, in suburban Boston. We come from a long line of Democrats. I think some of my changing is just a sort of examining of why I believe what I believe and understanding more about the role, why my family believes what we believe. I'm the president of a local union. I that is deep in my family. I don't think I knew it when I was a kid. As a kid, I wasn't mindful that my grandparents were union members and that my grandfather kept his job when he had an anti-Semitic boss because the union was there to fight for him. Or I wasn't mindful as a 9-year-old that I was seeing the doctor because my mom had a union contract as a teacher, right? So I wasn't aware of those things as kids, but as you grow up, as we talk more, it became pretty clear that the story of my family is a story of sort of many immigrants, I would say, is about entering the middle class because there were people there to fight for us, because there were unions there to fight for us, and there was a time when there were good government programs. And so I think some of my journey is sort of an awareness of how my family got here and why these things are important. And then I think the other big story over the last 4 years has been a heightened sense of awareness, and maybe you'd say tribalism over the last 4 years, right? The Trump administration has made, I think, all of us mindful of the important role of the presidency in a way that a lot of people were not thinking about before. And so I'm really mindful of shifting. Why weren't we doing more civics education before that? Why weren't we having that conversation? Why weren't we talking about racism as much before Trump? Trump is not the cause of racism, right? Trump is not the cause. And so it has been, I think, challenging me over the last 4 years to think about why we didn't do more before Trump and what we need to do post-Trump.
And that observation that Trump is a symptom of a larger disease, I think, is on so many levels eye-opening, like you said. And in our community, we have a lot of Trump supporters, a lot, and we have a lot of, Republicans only mindsets. And I think that I can look at several different ways of explaining that, right?
Yeah.
One being the evangelical Christian support and the alignment of Coptic Christians with evangelical Christians, simply on a superficial level of like, oh, you're Christians. Yeah, we're Christians. Like, oh, you're the dominant Christian group here in the United States. Like, okay, like we'll be more like you. Oh, you're anti-Islam? Dude, we just came from a country where we're persecuted by Islam. Like, we get that. Like, that's totally like aligned with us. Oh, killing babies? Like, we don't want to kill babies either. Like, okay, so let's get this straight. You guys are Christian, you're influential, you're anti-Islam, you're anti-abortion, like sign us up, right? And then it just becomes, okay, whatever you say is fine. And like, I'll hold my nose and vote for whatever gets put under this label because it's a lesser evil. So it's hard to even approach this conversation. And I think it's with sensitivity that, we first listen and say, okay, like I understand these things are really important to you, but I think that as you're saying about our responsibility now more than ever to educate people and clarify for them what their role actually is. Like your statement about civic education, like why haven't we been doing this? Because if they understand that, if they understand, no, you have more of a responsibility in this, than just to say Republicans are good, Democrats are bad, check, and like move on with your day. So it's not going to be easy, but what would you say would be necessary for people in a conservative community like ours to consider as responsibilities? And again, after they consider these responsibilities, if they still vote for a Democrat, if they still vote for a Republican, fine. But as long as you've thought it through on more than just a couple of superficial issues.
Yeah. One, I just want to say how much I appreciate the conversation that we're having, right? That we were talking about the things that we are not supposed to talk about, right? The cliches of like, you don't talk about religion and politics, right? That we wouldn't talk about who you vote for or issues like abortion. And so I really value this space. I think to your question, look, I fundamentally believe everybody should participate and engage and vote whoever you vote for. And it's not, as you said, trying to convince anyone to change their minds or tell them to do something they don't want to do. I think one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest mistakes we all make is that we take civic life, civic engagement in this country. Because I don't like talking about politics, because politics is the word we use to describe what we don't like. Right? If you're treated unfairly in your office, it's office politics. So politics is just a word for everything we don't like. So put that aside. But I think the biggest mistake we make is that we reduce civic engagement in this country to voting for a president once every 4 years. And it's not to say that that isn't important. I just spent a lot of time this year working on this and trying to help people vote. So yes, who you vote for president is important. That you vote for president is important, but it is like one part of a huge galaxy, right? Of that is civic engagement. And so, you know, do you, do you know who your elected representatives are in your hometown? Do you ever talk to them? Do you send a letter to the newspaper, right? Do you track the big decisions about your state budget and how your tax dollars are being spent? Not that tax dollars are bad. Tax dollars are great. They're how we fund things we couldn't possibly do alone, right? But are those reflecting your values, whatever your values are? Are you talking to your friends and neighbors, right, in a respectful way about this? Are you teaching your kids not just to go out and vote for one party? Are you teaching them why it matters, right? And how to talk to people about it? Are you teaching them about their experiences, their tribe's experiences, but also the experiences of others, how they're different, how they unite? So I think just one of the big challenge is seeing that, that voting for president is literally the tip of the iceberg. And there is so much more that around civic life that we could be doing and doing together.
I think you're aware of the town politics in Sharon, where I live, because we've talked about this offline. I completely underestimated what an effect local politics has on our lives, right? Like as a kid growing up, like, when I was in Jericho, like I didn't hear a single thing like about the town or how it's run, and I don't know if like the local government in Jericho is different than here in Sharon, but at least here in Sharon, like with Massachusetts and like the way that the towns are run here, there's some real opportunity to do good, and there's some real opportunity to do harm to the community if the right people are doing the right things or if the wrong people are doing the wrong things. So can you comment on like sort of more broadly, because I only know from my adult experience here in Sharon, like is that true across the country?
Absolutely. I think the elected offices, the budgets, the elections we hear least about have the largest impact on our lives, right? The decisions about the funding for your kids' schools, the decisions about whether your potholes are getting filled, right? Those decisions are being made at the local level, right? The president is not weighing in on those. And so I think and we fully recognize that that people are busy, right? Now more than ever, folks are struggling just to get through the day and to get to the next one. But I do think we have to figure out how we empower each other to get a little bit more involved. I do think a giant caveat is that President Trump did, and sorry to your friends who are supporters who are watching this, I think weaponized the American presidency even more than maybe it had been before. And, that I think, so it's easy for me to say, I think as a white man, that like the big decisions rest at the local level when Black and brown communities, immigrant communities, women, Muslim and Jewish and other communities felt deeply attacked by the highest power in the land every day. And so, the important decisions are being made at the local level, but the White House as a president has a bully pulpit that's incredibly important. And I know these past 4 years have been a deeply scary time for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that I have been horrified the last 4 years, and like the last 9 months have just been iconic of that, where there's people in our community that are right there with the people in Trump supporting demographics, that what virus? Masks? You don't need to wear a mask. And it's like, I understand that you are pro-life. I understand that you don't like abortion. I understand that you value security over freedom. I understand that you have worked hard for where you're getting and that you don't want people to get handouts. I understand that you've been convinced that Democrats are socialists, and we can get to that clarification between like a socialist and a social democracy, controlling the means of production versus, just making sure people don't die because they're poor, like really like basic things. I understand all of these things. None of these things have anything to do with science. None of these things have anything to do with the way that a virus is transmitted from one person's body to the others. And I don't see the connection between a position of authority telling you that you can't get sick and you believing it just because somebody with no awareness of anything other than building has their name on it. I don't understand.
I can't even imagine what it's like to have been a doctor these last 4 years. Like, how does your head literally not explode? Like, how is there not just a thin trickle of blood running out of your ears right now?
So I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And we had this conversation 4 years ago when you wanted Hillary and I wanted Bernie. And I don't think I realized how stupid I was. Right? Because
not stupid. No. Sorry, I put on mute for a sec so you didn't hear me slurping my coffee. Because no one needs to hear that. By the way, your mug is just lovelier than mine. Can we compare? I mean, I like my mug. It's a Library of Virginia mug. I believe in it deeply, but yours is pretty.
Here, let me turn this light off for a second just so you can see the on it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, so this was one of the registry gifts that we had. So this is our fine china.
I was going to say either that was a wedding gift or you stole that from a really nice hotel that you were in once.
Both. We stole all of our wedding gifts.
I love it. I stole the gift I got for you, so that makes sense. I don't, and I'm just trying to reconcile you again, not to come back to it, because later it'll be clear when I watch this how fixated I am on your jersey, but you were wearing a mesh Browns jersey and drinking from just the prettiest mug. And I'm just working on but I mean, I think that gets to it, right? The complexities.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. If
Yeah.
this Browns jersey weren't mesh, would it
Yeah.
be any less defective?
I have friends from Ohio. I have friends who are Browns fans. I've learned over time to just let them be. They've been through enough. They have been through enough.
You realize that every year they think that's going to be the year, right?
I mean, so I live in Northern Virginia. I live in the land of the Washington football team, who also believes that when they win their first game and they're like 1-3 on the season, they legit talk about Super Bowl aspirations. And it's so I know Brown fans have been in it. I would almost add them to the category of folks the last 4 years attacked by the White House, and not attacked by the White House, but also they've been through enough. Let them heal. Let us come together as a nation.
Dave, the year that their team moved, it was the same team with the same leadership, the same players, the same coaches, same team. They moved. Just the only thing that changed was their location, and they won the Super Bowl.
So you're saying it's
I'm just making an observation, and in medicine we would call that I forget, like there's like a term for it where like you just change like one variable and you compare, and the only thing that you would have to do to make it like a completely validated experiment is to get more teams to do that. Like you would have teams move in and out of Cleveland, right? Where you would take like the Patriots, like after winning 50% of the Super Bowls, and then like just like take that same team and like move them to Cleveland, and then they'd never win, and then move them back out, and then they win. Like it's not exactly.
I originally jumped in here to say you weren't dumb, and I'm gonna step back for a minute. I think
I'm just making observations. I'm not making claims. I'm just making observations.
Yeah. So you were talking about 2016 and different candidates that we supported. And I would just say there again, because I think we reduce our sense of civic engagement down to individual candidates we support. And maybe this is the tribal sense you have. And I there's no wrong candidate to support. I don't know that I believe in that. But I think who you support, right? And anyone, like, I think shaming people for who they support, right, is mostly wrong. Man, the Trump presidency really makes it hard to talk about this. All right, back to you.
So one thing that I will say is that if you told me to go back and vote then based on what I know now, I would say hold your nose and vote for Hillary, like by all means. The reason that I think that I shifted, where I don't see Hillary and Joe Biden as being, entirely different. Like they're both like, establishment Democrats and blah, blah, blah. And when I thought we had a good chance at having a country that was moving in the right direction of being unified, caring about people, again, not being socialist in that, we're going to control the means of production, but having healthcare for people and having education for people and having food for people, that like in the United States, we really shouldn't be having this conversation. Like we really shouldn't, right? So I felt like Bernie was kind of pushing us in that direction, where he wasn't going to be able to do everything that he wanted to do, right? He wasn't like yes, he was like, but like he would have been grounded by bureaucrats and Republicans and people that know how the system works, but they would have been inspired by his desire to push things forward in that direction. And I just felt like that tribalism and that like us versus them was really just kind of epitomized by the Clinton campaign and the people and the establishment that was supporting her, and the allegations that they fixed it, and whether they're true or not doesn't matter, right? Like whether it's true or not that they fixed the Democratic primary to oust Bernie, just the fact that like that was a conversation and that was something that people could believe, right? I found that problematic. And I think we've learned over the last 4 years where an establishment Democrat, right, is going to behave differently, I believe, or I hope now than they would have 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, they may have been more likely to say Republicans suck, and we know what we're doing, and we're going to do the right thing. And now it's like we've heard this for 4 years, and like it's grated on our ears so much that I hope at least that we're going to have a hard time thinking it and saying it in the inverse. So I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think what came up for me when you were talking about that, and and the change, right? The different place we are today than we were 4 years ago. And I think what pops for me is that change is always being driven by people, right? And that good politicians are responsive to that change and sometimes get attacked, right? We talk about politicians flip-flopping or just paying attention to public polling. I think there's a way we talk about it that diminishes it. But I think that's also exactly what we want from politicians, right? It's what we want from all of us. We all change. You and I would not have had this conversation when we knew each other in college, right? I mean, to your point, you've shifted. So I think we shift, and we have to allow for politicians to shift. And what shifts them are not their own individual epiphanies, I think, as much as movements, right? And you think about the movements that are more pronounced today than they were 4 years ago. I don't want to say that the movements were there, but I think if Joe Biden is going to lead differently than Hillary would have, or I think really than Joe Biden would have led 4 years ago, I think a lot of credit has to be given to young people, right, who have risen up on questions of gun violence that have moved beyond traditional partisan sides, right? The young people just saying, look, I don't want to live in a world, right, where I can get shot at school and at the movie theater. Crazy. Totally insane, right?
Where do they get off saying that?
Yeah, exactly. Or young people saying, right, I like climate change is going to impact me differently, right? And I want to live in a world where the air is going to be clean and the water is going to be clean my whole life. And credit, I think, to young people who built movements that were much more understanding of our baked in inequities, because I think both these movements said, I don't want to, I want to be free from violence, and I want clean air and water. And there are a lot of communities right now, disproportionately Black and brown, that don't have those things right now. I think, we are in a different place because of the movement for Black lives and the sustained organizing that they've done. So I think, movements that have come up around healthcare or immigration reform. So I really, it is what fuels my sense of optimism. It's how I can get out of bed every day, is I do think that old slogan is true, that the people in power are less important than the power in the people, right? And that we can, and it is not easy, and people have died for this, and people struggle for this, but that mass movements matter, and they shift our politics. Sometimes they shift it incrementally. Sometimes it is hard to see that shift. And sometimes we get breakthroughs, right, that are usually years in the making. And I think we're in a moment now where there's the potential for breakthroughs. And that, to your point, the establishment, and I think we have I think a lot of our political terms are often like defined by people who don't like it. So whatever the establishment means, some days I'm in the establishment, sometimes I'm out of it. But I think folks in charge have to be responsive to these movements.
So define your relationship to the establishment, because you mentioned earlier that you're the president of a labor union. What does that mean, and how does that relate to the Democratic Party? Yeah,
so the president of a labor union of healthcare workers, and local government employees, so in our communities, librarians and social workers and public health nurses and mental health staff. And so our members are just trying to get a better lives for themselves, their families, and their communities. They're in the public sector, and so elected officials are their bosses, so they take political action. What's funny, I think, about our relationship to the establishment is I don't think there's a definition of the establishment, or as you pointed out, socialism, that is informed by by actual history or theory. I think we use these terms to describe people we don't like, right? So when our union members endorse a candidate, maybe who's a challenger or is seen as the progressive, we get called progressive champions. When those exact same union members endorse a candidate who's maybe the incumbent, we get called the establishment. Same members, right? Nothing has changed. It's just there's a group of people who didn't like the decisions that union members made. I think the same about socialism, right? When Social Security, when Medicare, Medicaid were introduced, they were called socialism. We don't call them socialism today. It's the same programs. The only thing that's changed is people's view of them. Or so I tell myself.
Well, I mean, I just had a conversation yesterday with a very, very, very bright guy named Ray Malika from our community. And he referred to Christianity as existentialist. And I was like, hold the phone. I'm like, please, just so we don't get taken the wrong way, can you please clarify what you mean? Because when you say existentialist, it's associated with Camus and Sartre and other existential nihilists that are like a little different in their train of thought from Christians. And he clarified it, and he's like, no, this is the distinction, and this is why you can apply this term to Christians. And he very eloquently explained that there's a difference between existential nihilism and Christianity, which is existentialist in its foundation. Someone might not understand at all what he said at all. And the only thing that they hear is they were talking about existentialism, connecting it with Christianity. They brought up nihilists, and they were looking at Christianity from a philosophical lens, and they made it seem that the way that we get to our faith is through thinking instead of our belief in God, and this is all heretical. It's very possible. It's very possible. And when we talk about like healthcare and food and housing, we're not saying that someone deserves to get their fourth heart valve replacement for their infected heart valve from the drugs that they're shooting up. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we're going to lower costs for the entire healthcare system by providing preventive care and preventive medicine for everyone, so they don't wait till they're so sick that they end up in the emergency room, more sick, more expensive to take care of, and not under any kind of covered system. So yes, for the benefit of these people, but also for the benefit of society, we need to actually take care of people. So again, like, people hear a term, and they were talking about how effective Trump was in labeling Biden as a socialist, right? Or like maybe you could do that with Bernie, maybe, but like Biden, like he's the rightest Democrat as he's as right of a Democrat as they come. Like, it's not like it's not even rooted in any kind of reality. But once you've said that word, it sticks with people. So how do you go about educating people, and how do you go about walking people through just enough of an understanding so that they don't react towards like socialism and existentialism and immediately say, we don't believe in that. That's not who we are, because it triggers like an identity crisis within them.
Yeah, that's right. I think I go back to what we talked about earlier, which is like Trump is not the cause of this, right? Like Trump is not the first elected official to try to trigger folks or drive wedges or to outright lie, right? I mean, this is a feature of not just American politics, right? But I think any competition, any kind of politics. And I think part of it, not to get too 30,000 foot, is I think to get to the underlying reasons of why as Americans do we view our society as a zero-sum game, right? Because I think that's what underlies, that's why appeals to tribalism, that's why appeals to fear, to scarcity work, because we are convinced as a society that if you get something, that hurts me, right? Your gain is my loss. You know, and I think we have an economy that feeds that. I think, right, there is real scarcity, there is real insecurity. Our economic future can look a little bleak. We are moving ever closer towards jobs that are either part-time or benefitless, a gig economy, right? And our economy is transitioning. Lots of folks are leaving out. And so I think we've got to address why does your gain feel like my loss? Because until we do that, there will always be politicians who will exploit that. And that happens on both sides, right? I don't think anyone has more overtly played to people's fears and prejudices and bigotry than Donald Trump, right? As people have said, he is particularly speaking the quiet part out loud, right? Saying the unsaid things. But he is not alone. He's not the first, he's not the last. And I do think, so I think there's, as you say, an education piece, but I really think there's just a strong, I think there's community building that we have to do. I think, and sometimes I get mocked a little when I say this, you've got to love each other, right? I think this is actually the overlap of the organizing I do and the faith I have, and I think the faith you have, that loving your neighbor is real, right? That is not an abstract. There's a reason that's one of the commandments. We've got to love each other, and that absent loving your neighbor and your community, I think it's going to be really hard to drive political change.
I like the sign that's over your right shoulder.
I keep it up there. I often have this frame for video conferences I do, not to tell others how to be, but so that I can see it, right? It's a reminder to myself to, we all work hard. It's a reminder we all work hard, and it's a reminder that be nice to people is really just as critical.
I'm sympathetic to the people that want to do the right thing and want things to be better, but cannot be convinced that it's not a zero-sum game. I understand. And I understand, like you said, where there might not be enough to go around, and we get into this like game theory of hawks and doves and, you know, prisoners' dilemmas, and, you know, like, how do I make sure that I don't end up being on the street because I voted or I decided or I advocated for something that gave away my inheritance or gave away my portion to someone else. And it's two-sided, right? There's the person in need, and then there's the person of privilege that I would consider myself to be in, that are both advocating for let's do a better job taking care of each other, right? Because it's the person that's in need that's saying, I need this. And it's the person that kind of has like the security of being like, listen, I'll be fine. Like, like take an extra few percent from my salary. Like what's going to happen? And I'm sympathetic to the people that don't really have a need, but also don't have that added buffer of security to say, if you take away some of my allocated resources and you give it to someone else, I'm going to be in a tough position. So I agree with you that trying to short circuit the zero sum game mentality is important. How do we do that?
And in some ways, that's the ultimate question, right? I think part of what we've been trying to do and say at the union is that, as you hear my dog come in, yeah, hey buddy.
Maybe your dog's got the solution. We should listen.
He clearly has strong ideas about this. We believe that part of it, and look, I believe there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing to do, right? This is deeply entrenched in our society, and it's gonna be generational change. It's gonna take a lot of folks. My favorite Jewish teaching says, we're not gonna save the world, right, in our lifetime. We're not called to save the entire world in our lifetime, but neither can we ignore that fight, right? You have to do your piece. So part of what I believe is that racism is a meaningful part of this problem that we have, because that zero-sum game that you talk about, that sense of, well, if I lose something, or if someone else gains something, it's my loss. Not all, but a lot of that is driven by racism in our country, right? And often these fears are around racism and xenophobia and anti-immigrant bias, right? We are told that immigrants are coming to the country and stealing our jobs, right? We are told right, we remember the welfare queen, image, right? When we talk about people getting welfare and living off the government, it is not colorblind. It often comes with very specific targets that are usually Black. And there is a reason that those narratives take shape. It's not that everyone is inherently a terrible person. It's we live in a society that reinforces this, right? We live in a society with structural racism. And so again, it's not a silver bullet, but I think we have to understand the racism and xenophobia that's inherent in our society, address it a little bit, remember that if we are not the descendants of enslaved people, we are all immigrants, right? If we're not the descendants of enslaved folks or Native people, we all came here, right? And so what is the difference between the immigrants who are coming here today with the immigrants, with your parents, right? With my great-grandparents, so many Americans who came here in search of a better life. So I do think it's a little bit understanding why we have these narratives, why we have this scarcity mentality, and being honest and clear about racism and white supremacy and bigotry and xenophobia in this country, and addressing it so that we can know that we can move forward, we can understand what unites us, and I think ultimately understand that that you and I and 99% of us, right, are really all in it together, or at least all have the same economic interests here, right? The difference is between, and you are a successful doctor, right? The differences between you as a successful doctor, economic differences, and a low-wage home care worker who does valuable work are nothing compared to the difference between you, right, and the very top corporate CEOs in our country. It's not to badmouth them, but to just recognize, right, the real discrepancies there, so that we can start to address it. Sorry, that was a mouthful.
I mean, I don't think you answer that question, first of all, in one conversation. And you don't answer that question maybe even in one lifetime, right? But I think not answering the question at all is a problem, right? And you pointed to that Jewish saying, and I think JFK, the first Catholic president, said the same thing. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you can put labels on things. Oh, that's so. Oh, that's Oh, that's only blah. But listen, there's a truth that kind of resonates for people that are looking for it. And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but I mustache you something.
Been waiting for this moment, and it did not disappoint.
I think it gives me great joy to know how much joy it gives you to see how ridiculous I am. Like, there's not a lot of people that like truly like look at me and go, look at that, he's completely ridiculous. I like that. Most people are like,
oh, I love you and who you are, but I'm going to save that for the end.
So what I mustache you is, I don't think that you and I had ever looked at each other and said, oh yeah, we're very similar. Right? Like, we've never said, like, superficially, like, oh, you're Jewish. No, I'm Christian. Oh, no. And like, oh, you're thoughtful. No, I just kind of like, oh, you're smart and you work hard. Oh no, I just kind of like do whatever just to kind of get by. Oh, you do a couple of things and like you really focus and get them exactly right. No, I just kind of have, and you remember when you were the manager at the at the food.
Oh, at the dining halls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like you started there like freshman year and you worked your way up. And by the time we were juniors, like you were one of like the senior people running the dining hall, right? And I'm the guy that came in like freelance and I worked the grill a couple of times.
Yes, then, forgot about that.
You don't remember that? Yeah. So
yeah.
like we couldn't be more different. But despite like on the surface, like really like nothing objective, we still always saw that, okay, we both want the same thing. And the earlier question was, okay, how do we nudge people in this direction of wanting the same thing, like wanting to seek truth, wanting to not make it about who you are, who I am, what our differences are, not to see things as a zero-sum game. Like, okay, like you're the manager, I'm flipping burgers on the grill. Like, every dining hall needs someone of your caliber to do the managing, and somebody of my caliber like to make jokes and be like, oh yeah, I can do that for you. And there's this unity in diversity. There's this harmony of different parts doing their jobs until we can convince more people, right? How do we find each other? Because I still don't know, right? I don't know. And I'm going to try to say this without crying, but I don't know how I was lucky enough to find you, right? But how do people like us find each other? And how do we encourage people that look around and they don't see anybody like that, right? How do they survive?
I said I would do it at the end, but let me just say now, I have always been inspired by you, and because you are talking now about I think playing up your inherent goofiness and humor, and absolutely. But I will say, you have left a mark on me my entire life, and I don't know if I've said this to you. Um, you have left a mark on me my entire life, as because I remember you in college as someone who, and goofy and silly and that, but someone who was so clear of who you were and had such strong values, and you knew who you were, or this is how I perceived you. You knew who you were, and that was different, right? There were many ways in which you were different. I think one of the most immediately apparent was you were a devout Coptic Christian, and you lived in a fraternity with people who I don't think even knew what that was. And you were very vocal, and you were very visible with your faith, and sometimes, maybe more than sometimes, openly sort of mocked for it. But you never, at a time in our lives, right? Like, we met when we were what, like 18, 19, at a time when I think so many people, myself included, just wanted to know we belonged, that we fit in, that we weren't weird, that that were others like us. You had this extraordinary presence and frame of mind just to say, like, this is who I am. I'm super different in some ways, but I belong here, and like, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to tone it down. And again, whether it was your faith or your goofiness or your obsession with that Third Eye Blind album, and we are not getting into it here, I don't want to hear it. I perceived you as never, you knew you never toned yourself down. At a time in our lives where I perceived it as every force was telling you to, or maybe telling me to. And so 20 plus years later, right? That is still a inspiration. That's still a North Star for me. And I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you this.
I can tell you that it was all perceived and not real, because I really was the odd duck. And if I knew how, like, it wasn't like, oh wow, this guy's really impressive, like he really knows how to be himself. No, I just didn't know how to fit in. Like, if I knew how to fit in, like, oh, I just need to do that. Like, why didn't you just say that? Like, I would have done that. Oh, like, completely deny my identity and just
See,
say,
I don't want to tell you you're wrong, but I think you were smart enough to know you had a choice. And I think you could, and who you were made it seem like not a choice, but I think you knew you had a choice to be you, or to be who everybody else was. And you chose to be you. And I will say this matters, I think, to your question, how do we do this? Right, in a society where increasingly we're segregated, right? We live in neighborhoods, we attend houses of worship, we engage in activities that are increasingly segregated. I think part of the answer is that we need to get out of we need to get out of our bubbles. We need to get out of just our communities. We need to, and I think it is inherently tied to justice issues, right? We need to make sure that folks from every community can be in every space. And I think whether that's educational spaces or healthcare spaces or political spaces, right? And sometimes it gets dismissed as just identity politics, right? Which again, I think is a term that people hate the term politics, and people talk about identity sometimes in a negative way because we're uncomfortable talking about race. But the truth is, we need to be around each other. We cannot recognize each other's inherent humanity if we're not around each other. If I hadn't had you as my sophomore year roommate, right? Then I don't think I would have, then I think I would be liable to think of Coptic Christians today as weird or different, right? Or as a different sect. Those anti-immigrant narratives, right, would take hold with me. That those narratives about the other being different would take hold. And I think we have to look at, we had a great education at Cornell, right? Which is not necessarily the most diverse place, right? Why weren't there more Black students with us? Why didn't we have more of those experiences? So I think really, how do we make sure that everybody has the opportunities to thrive and that we have those opportunities together?
And
not because of some PC-ness, right? Or not because of reasons it gets dismissed or belittled. But because one, everybody needs those opportunities to thrive, right? Everyone is worthy, everyone is deserving, but also because it genuinely leads to a better society.
Right, and I think that's that's interesting that you say that, because I was about to say that it's not an either or, where, you know, do we do this as individuals or do we do this as a society? It's like, do it in any way that you can, where if you're able to go somewhere and meet somebody and know something about something that you didn't know before, that adds to our collective pool of meaning, right? And the more we separate and the more we segregate and the more, you know, we think of people as others, the more likely it's going to be that we're going to misunderstand them and think of them as really much more different from us than they really are, right? And if we as a society are able to create more opportunities for people to interact, then that's less likely to happen. So it's not an either or. But I think it's interesting that you're pointing to the need for this to happen and the desire for this to happen, not for the benefit of the person who needs the opportunity, right? But for the benefit of the person who already has the opportunity, right? So if you're in a position of privilege, you are denying yourself the gift of being exposed to something that you otherwise would be if you went out of your way and used that privilege to give somebody else the opportunities that you have, because you're going to be benefiting more than them. And our society,
1000%.
Yeah, no, that's in, like I was gonna say, but like I think you made a more important point, that this isn't just charity. This isn't just for their benefit. This is for like our collective benefit, that we need to understand each other better. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, no, 1000%. I think that's right. It's it's I think analogous to, like, you can't convince someone to do something, right? It's the same, like, you can't save someone. You can't be driven by this totally altruistic sense of, I am doing this for you, right? But rather this idea, right, that your liberation is entwined with mine. Truly, right? I believe it. Until all of us are free, none of us are free, and that that we do this for ourselves, right? As much as we do it with others, not for others. And I love what you said about, right, this is not a grand thing. This is not like presidential campaign messaging. We all can do this in our communities, right? I think it's, look, the best, one of the things that I learned that was taught to me is this idea of tracking. Look at the spaces you're in, right? Look who is there. See who's there, right? Without judgment, just see who's there. See who's not there. Think about that community it represents. Think about your local PTA. Does your PTA, do the people at a PTA meeting look like everyone in your community? Who's there, who's not? If folks aren't there, why not, right? What is it that people need to be there? Is it help with childcare? Is it translation services? Is there something deeper? And I think if we can think of ourselves, right, not as, or spaces not as inherently good or bad or diverse or not diverse or racist or not racist, but just to say, we need to be working towards making sure that everyone can fully be present as themselves. What do we do to get better? Then, you know, the Donald Trumps, the demagogues will always be here. They'll only come into power if we let them.
And we're the ones that give them the ammunition and the fuel, because if we're already divided, if we already are are suspicious of each other, if we already are looking out for ourselves, then they have something to leverage and say, well, I'll give you what you want, but you just got to put me in power, right? But if it's about,
Totally.
if it's really truly at least a noble and genuine and even selfish desire to be altruistic, right? If it's really like, no, like the right thing for us is for us to do the right thing for other people, not just for ourselves, then they really don't have anything to work with, because that's what, like you said, the people have demanded.
Yeah. I last point of that, I think it's telling that when Russian intelligence, right, wanted to infiltrate our elections, and they're in, right, countries do this all the time. They didn't need to hack our voting machines. They didn't need to change the tallies. All they did, right, was throw wedge issues out onto the internet. All they did was throw out some tough, divisive language and images. All they did was play to our prejudices, and we took it from there.
And it takes discipline and it takes education to not take that bait.
Yeah. And to be clear, I am not holier than thou. I have, like, me on Twitter is not my best self, and I am sure I have ended up fighting with Russian bots.
Yeah. And that's not the point. That's not, and like I said, like just 4 years ago, we disagreed, and we are looking back going, wow, didn't see that one coming. And then now, we're informed by what's happened, and 4 years from now and 4 years after that, and then on an ongoing basis at a local level with our communities, our families, our churches, our synagogues, we have an opportunity to say, okay, let's keep learning, let's keep evaluating, let's keep looking at ourselves, like, what am I missing? Oh, that's a good point. Okay, what should we have done differently? Okay, let's try that next time. That's I mean, that's really not, it's not, I mean, I don't think it's that hard, but like, it just seems, like it's crazy talk to do that. So thank you, David. A pleasure as always. Any parting words, any parting wisdom?
Um, there is such, first off, thanks for having me. This was great. And if for no other reason, I got to tell you this thing I've wanted to tell you for 20 years about how you, how you carry yourself through this world. How you did that as a 19-year-old stuck with me 2 decades later, and will stick with me for decades, and gives me strength in moments where I need to say something that will not resonate with the majority of people, but I feel needs to be said. And so I love you, brother. I will, and I love this because I think you were showing there is the most powerful act we can do is to ask questions and listen. I really believe. And we are tuned again in politics to think of the guy giving the speech, and we are taught to think of a guy giving a speech is what politics is powerful. A white guy, right? An older
white guy with a suit, with either a red tie or a blue tie, giving the speech.
Yep. And I am thrilled about President-elect Joe Biden, but let's be honest, like, this election is a continuation of the metrics of that, even as we celebrate the first Black woman, the first Asian woman to be vice president. But we are taught that that's what politics is. We are taught that's what power is. I think what you were doing here is a reminder that listening, really listening, right? Asking questions and really listening and building relationships and community, that's power, that's change. And the final quote I'll leave you with is I took my daughters, I don't even know what time it was, a few months ago, to the Supreme Court in the wake of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. We masked up and we stayed apart. They'd written a letter to her that we lay on the steps of the Supreme Court. And there were lots of posters, there were lots of signs that people wrote things she said, but the one that kept catching my eye in that moment was her quote, more or less, that said, fight for what you believe and do so in a way that will lead others to follow you. And I love that. I think that's a great model for us. We have beliefs. It's not that we're supposed to downplay them. It's not that we're supposed to hide them or let them go. Fight for them. Fight for what you believe in, even if it's different than what others believe, but do so in a way that leads others to join you. And I would add empowers others to join you. I think if we can do that, I think we're going to be okay.
And always hope. Thank you, David. And thank you for listening or watching.